Monday. Red Polly.
Dusty.
Blue Poncho.
Tupac.
Street.
Hey, Wilson Hoosier. Hey, Elvis.
Drake.
Go.
Welcome, everyone, to Health Matters, where we bring you the up-to-date information on what matters to you in the NFL. All right, Tyler, we're going to take it away with the injury roundup. Let's go. What do we have go on here in camp this past week?
Well, big news for fantasy football fans. Cooper Kupp to return this week for joint practice from his hamstring injury. As we know, he is recovering from his ankle injury last year and his surgery for that, and now the hamstring injury, which has kept him out for most of the preseason. But he is supposed to be back, which is big for fantasy football fans who didn't know where to take him and the injury question marks surrounding him.
Yeah, you got to keep in mind Cooper's had an ACL a few years ago. He did very well off that, actually. So you got the post ACL in 2018. He was actually played very well after he came back in 19, and probably better than our performance metrics would indicate in 2020, 2021. But those will remember last year about week 10 went out with a high ankle sprain, and this put him on IR for the rest of the season. So that was a big hit to the Rams.
Yeah, it's good to see him back on the field.
Absolutely. Cowboys linebacker DeMarvion Overshown tore his ACL. He was their third-round draft pick. He is out for the season. And Bills offensive tackle Tommy Doyle is also out for the season. Left knee injury. They had an air cast on him before he left the preseason game on a cart, really hurting the Bills' depth at the offensive line in the offensive tackle position there. Eagles cornerback McPherson tore his Achilles, also out for the season. And Eagles linebacker Hassan Reddick, who is a huge part of that defense, had surgery to take care of a thumb injury. Luckily for Eagles fans and the team, this was done so that he'll be ready to go for season start, which is a huge thing for them. As I mentioned, he is a massive part to that defense.
Yeah, we see the Eagles a lot on the roundup this week. They had a couple scary injuries on Thursday night. 2 players getting spine boarded with concussions and neck sprain. Wide receiver Tyree Cleveland and defensive tackle Moro Ojimo. And then also over the weekend, the Patriots rookie Isaiah Bolden suffered a concussion, and he had to be spine boarded, taken off the field to the hospital as well. And we hear that's a concussion diagnosis, so he will be out for a couple weeks. So that's going to bring us into our injury talk of the week. The spine boarding and the cervical injuries are very scary. So Tyler, talking about cervical spine boarding, neck injuries, your previous history in the NFL and athletic training, give us a few of your notes and your take on how to manage that on the field.
Yeah, Brandon, when it comes to spine boarding, comes to that type of situation, one of the biggest things is preparedness. An EAP, an emergency action plan, that's something that the medical staff, including athletic trainers, doctors, and all of that medical staff go over time and time again. Everyone on that staff has their own responsibilities that they have to be able to do if that situation arises. There's an entire checklist that they go through every time they practice. And they also meet prior to the game, not just your own staff, but a lot of times you'll meet with the opposing team staff to make sure that everyone knows what the protocols are if that situation comes up. And I know Doc can talk a little bit more to that. But when it comes to the actual spine boarding process, as I mentioned, everyone has their own roles and responsibilities. A lot of times the head athletic trainer will be at the head, making sure that the player that's down on the field is stabilized, that their neck and their spine is stabilized, that they're calming that player down. That could also be the role of an assistant athletic trainer. But the person at the head wants to talk clear and concise. They want to make sure that they lead that team so that they can successfully get the patient or the player onto the spine board, make sure that he gets what he needs and gets off to the hospital so that they can do further testing. Depending on the situation, you may have to remove shoulder pads, even the helmet, though normally the helmet does stay on and just the face mask is taken off. But depending on the situation, if you have to do compressions, things like that, then shoulder pads could be taken off. But the most important thing is that everyone knows their role and that they get that player to the hospital and get that further testing.
Yeah.
Doc, obviously being on the sideline, being with the medical staff, you were in charge of a lot of that, I'm sure. Give us some of your thoughts on that process.
I tell you, you're spot on. And the biggest thing is train, 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 train. You hope it doesn't happen. You can already see this preseason. We've had a number of spine boarding, a number of folks taken off, a number of folks taken to the hospital. We had a game that got postponed in preseason game, and due to an injury where the person didn't have much response for 30 to 60 seconds. And those things are the real deal. But what is critical is the ability to rehearse this and practice it. And we have a ton of medical professionals. There's probably no safer place to be than on an NFL field, from the paramedics and that have all the medications, our innovation gear, the ability to revive someone. We know where the defibrillators are. And that's the importance of the 60-minute pregame meeting of all the medical staffs of both teams, the paramedics, the referees, making sure the protocols, as well as the spotters in the sky, as we call them. And they're usually athletic trainers that ring down to the referee if there's any situation that needs further evaluation from a medical standpoint. So it's super safe there. They do a really good job. Always have to rehearse, always have to know your role. It depends on what's going on. If you had a patient, Damar Hamlin, for example, a lot of times when you're in a cardiac situation, the person at the head or the person maybe right off the head or running what we call the code might be the traumatologist. We have a traumatologist on the sideline. It could also be the head team physician, depending on their training or what their background is. But in general, you have some really specific high-end individuals that are right there with a bevy of medical gear to be able to take care of those players right away.
Definitely. Yeah, it was kind of interesting watching the game. The head athletic trainer ran out and jumped over Isaiah, and first thing he did was check for breathing, with the scariness of the Damar Hamlin situation. And then someone grabbed the C-spine, and they went to work, and they did a great job getting him off the field. And, luckily it was only a concussion. So, that's still a big injury in the NFL. He still has function on his arms, as does the other players. So, Tyler, when you were there, what kind of concussion testing did you guys do for the return to play and preseason and all of those things? Give us a little insight into that.
Yeah, first of all, most teams, I'd say probably all teams now, they do some early testing. So you kind of have a baseline of what to expect for those players. So when they do potentially have a concussion, they go through some of those tests again, and there's a baseline to compare that to. Just like in orthopedics, if you were to go see Dr. Preventure here for a shoulder injury, he'd check both sides. So they have that baseline of what a healthy shoulder looks like in an unhealthy. Same thing you want to do with the brain, right? You have to do that early. So they'll do that when preseason or before that, just to make sure you have that baseline. Then there are some things they can do on the field. They have checklists they go through. There's certain tests like the SCAT tests and SCAT-3 tests now, SCAT-4, I think at this point. Back when I was there, it was SCAT-3. But they have these different things where you're, again, asking them certain questions, but you have to make sure that they're ones that they don't know, of course, asking them to remember things of that nature. But the biggest thing is that they have that baseline and those computer tests now so that you can really check back and forth on whether or not they have, if they're able to recite those things and remember those things.
Definitely. Yeah. One of the big things when I was there was always, telling the player they're out and then wanting to be back on the field and making sure they were being safe. And that falls into the team Doc's hands. So Doc, dealing with the players on getting them back and them wanting to be back earlier than they should be. How do you manage that?
Brandon, the NFL, I think, has done a really good job being proactive about brain health. And right around 2015, 2016, the NFL and each team, we started employing independent neurologic consultants. So it really took, number one, the burden off the head team physician to really make that no-go call. But it was done in conjunction with everyone. But it also brought in some amazing professionals that deal with this for a living, and they know how to do it. They know the evaluation. The baseline data was really being collected, and now there's a really good baseline data on players and some norms and other things that we look at in order to see how the brain was affected. Not the least of which, you also have to just look at the video. Video is key. And if it just looks like you had a concussion, if it looks like you're out, Brandon, to your point, you just take precaution and you don't put that player back in and give that brain a rest. And you know what? Our data at thepredictors.com shows that when you get brain rest, guess what? You do better. You do better when you come back after a week or two. It's really a compelling story. And the quarterbacks do better after concussion, the running backs, the tight ends, the receivers. With a couple weeks rest, there's probably multifactorial in there, but getting some brain rest, focusing on that is really key, and they come back stronger and better. And that's pretty clear across the board for our data from the predictors.
Yeah, Ryan, give us a little of the stats. Give us the numbers.
Yeah, so with concussions, the average games missed is 3.2 among all NFL players. And when you incorporate a neck sprain on top of the concussion, that jumps up to 4.2 games missed. But the crazy thing is, as Dr. Preventure was just alluding to, they're only down 1 to 3% in production when they come back. They come back when they're healthy. They're not trying to come back too early, and they come back when they're ready, and they play well.
That's all.
I think that might be something too that's new with concussions too. When you look at other injuries and they do try to get on the field fast, I think concussions being where they are now, and the media that's behind it and the understanding even more than that's come with them, is players understand how important it is to really let themselves rest after an injury like that and not try to get on the field too fast, and really let themselves recover from those types of things.
It's amazing to see the evolving game.
Yeah, totally. Brain health is key, and brain rest is key for that. And I think the NFL has done a really good job. Is there more work to do? Of course. And the NFL is funding a ton of research grants. They put hundreds of millions of dollars into this to really look at functional scans, functional MRI scanning, better testing, better evaluation, better pre and post concussion testing, evaluation, and return to play guidelines. And in addition, even just last year, refining the concussion rules even further, which we like to see. We like a dynamic approach to this that evolves with how the game evolves.
Yeah, because, health does matter. Rolling right along, let's get into our division for the week. We have the NFC East preview, and obviously the Eagles have been pretty banged up on our injury roundup, but we still see them as the clear favorite. Tyler, give me your breakdown on the Eagles.
Yeah, they still have a really strong defense. Obviously, offensively, Jalen Hurts did fantastic last year. You have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith at wide receiver. They're the clear favorite. They're the easy pick, I guess you could say. Everyone has them, or a lot of people have them. But the NFC East in general could be a tough division this season. There's a lot of teams with some real potential there. It could go either way. But I would agree that barring any big injuries, the Eagles still have that favorite right now.
Yeah, looking at the Cowboys and the Redskins, they both, they're on the coaching hot seat. They've had a lot of injuries in the past couple of years. Ryan, give us the bus scores for those two teams the past couple of years.
Yeah, so Washington's bus score ended up being 71.2, which was the third worst in their division, and the Dallas Cowboys end up with a 70.2 bus score. Doc, what does that mean?
Well, the bus score is the banged up score, and it's proprietary algorithm that takes into quite a bit. And it's amazing how we continue to refine this and reflect the overall team's health and performance. And it's not just a basic health metric, because that doesn't tell the whole story, but it's also how the players are used, how each individual offensive line is doing, the defensive line, and we come up with an overall metric. If you've got a quarterback that's down, it's going to affect the bus score much more for your team than just, say, one player that might be RB3 or RB2. Maybe that starts to affect a little bit, but QB1, that's going to affect it a little bit more. So it's a proprietary algorithm that uses millions of data points on a real-time basis to generate a score for the teams that we track, but we also have scores for all aspects of the game.
Yeah, and with that bus score, I mean, each team you're looking to be in the 80s. Is that the good score? What would you put in the high rankings?
It's very interesting when we really look at this and take a statistical data analytic approach. We have found that the score is high. Number one, highly predictive of who's going to make the playoffs. Not like by week 1 or week 2, but pretty good ways into the season. But well before even many of the experts in the room know. So the data tells all health matters. That's number one. Number two is we're looking at it from long-term return, how players are doing, how they get back, how they behave, how coaches use them. It's super interesting because every team's a little bit different. And you got an indoor stadium, you got an outdoor stadium, you got different coaching, you got offensive coordinators. So it's really interesting to look at this and dive deep down and to see how the players are utilized each week, because there's some coaches that will rest their players a little more and some coaches that rest them a little bit less. And that matters.
Yeah, and so the Cowboys and the Commanders in the coaching hot seat, and the bus scores were kind of mid-level. And then we have the Giants to wrap up the division. They're on the rise, They had a good year, finishing strong. Daniel Jones is coming on. You got Saquon Barkley coming back from injury, even though he has the 1-year contract. Tyler, how are you on the Giants?
I'm pretty high on the Giants this year, actually. I love Brian Daboll as a coach. He obviously showed last year that he could get it done, and that he's building a great team underneath him. One thing I'm a little worried about is definitely their wide receiving core. Not really sure how that's going to pan out. We'll talk about that a little bit more once we get into fantasy. They had a couple very close games last year that they pulled out. Their record may have been a little nice compared to some of the games that they barely won, that could have gone either way. So that's definitely something to watch. But overall, I think they're one of the teams that's going to make this division tough this year and give the Eagles some trouble.
Yeah, Doc, what goes back into coming back from a big injury and being the number one guy?
Yeah, so coming back from a big injury, especially if you were out for the whole season or a significant part of the prior season, it's a big deal. And we talked about it a little bit in the last podcast, as the mental side of the healing equation. It's super important. It's super important that that's dialed at the highest level. And every team's got some really good sports psychologists. Individual players have their own life coaches and gurus and other things that can certainly be helpful. But getting mentally back in the game is really key. And so what you might see is the first 1 or 2 games is kind of getting their feet under them, but they're probably ready from a physical standpoint. It's really more from the mental side of the game, Brandon. You can't underestimate that. And so the more we can do to help the player optimize their return in all phases of their recovery is super important.
Yeah, definitely. So that brings us to our do draft list for the week. Keeping in theme with the Giants, we have Saquon on the do draft. Last year he proved he came back from that injury. So what do you think on Saquon, Tyler?
Yeah, Saquon, he had some problems for a few years with injuries, but last year, like you said, he proved he could return. He had over 1,300 yards rushing, 10 touchdowns. I mean, he won games for fantasy players last year on his own. He's an unbelievable back, strong as all hell. I think he is going to do it again this year. They have to be careful with him with some load management, but if they can do that, then I think he's going to be an absolute great pickup for fantasy players. Right now, a lot of places have him as running back 6, kind of late in that first round, which is I think is an acceptable place for him in his ADP. I think if you get him there, you'll get some good productivity. I don't think you'll be upset about that pick.
Yeah, we also have the Giants tight end Darren Waller as on a do draft. He's a big target, Tyler. He has a little bit of a downside. Doc, he had a big injury history in his career. What do you think on drafting him at tight end number 5?
Yeah, he's got things that sort of go together, and I'm worried he's going to get injured again this season, particularly with the hamstring. 2022, he had a hamstring, missed 8 weeks. 2021, a knee, 5 games. And also missed another game for an undisclosed reason. But those things can go together, and so I'm worried that he could have a little bit of re-aggravation. So you got to be prepared to drop and add Darren as the injuries potentially unfold for him.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the Giants, they have a bad wide receiver crew, in your opinion, Tyler. We got a do not draft guy, on the Giants, wide receiver Paris Campbell. I think Ryan has a little injury history on him.
Yeah, so Paris Campbell, before last season, he played fine without any injuries last season, but in 2021 he ended up missing 11 games with a foot injury. He missed 2 games in 2020 with a PCL and MCL injury, which happened at the end of the season, so he had the rest of the offseason to recover from. But last season he still only put up 3 touchdowns for 623 yards. Don't really see him being a valuable asset to really many fantasy football teams unless you're in maybe a 20-man league, but that's really the only scenario I can see him being valuable to your fantasy team.
600 yards, Tyler. That's a big number for some of those leagues. You know, what do you think? Do you have him on your do not draft, or would you take a flyer on him?
I do have him on my do not draft. I think that PCL MCL. I think he got hurt in week 2. He missed the entire season for that. But the 623 yards. What I'm worried about with that is the other 3 seasons where he was hurt. One good season doesn't make up for 3 where he missed a ton of time. And that's, back to Doc talking about Darren Waller. That's why I'm actually had him on my do draft, is he does have that injury history. But because the wide receiving core also has that, and they're not as strong, I think Darren Waller at tight end 5 going in around that 5th round, I don't think you're losing out if you grab him. I think he has a great upside. And if he doesn't do that great, you don't lose that much taking him in the 5th round. But when it does come to Paris Campbell, I'm a little worried. I'll be honest. Daniel Jones has showed that he's a great quarterback. But if you compare him to some of the big ones, he doesn't get all the media attention that everyone else gets. And he hasn't really had that wide receiver core, that big target like a lot of other quarterbacks have. So I'm interested to see what he does with Paris Campbell, but I don't have him on my board right now. It's not someone I'm attacking or trying to go after based on that injury history.
Yeah. What about the rest of the NFC East? Who else do you not have on your board for this draft? See a running back in Washington you might not want to draft?
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about Brian Robinson. That's big coming from me as a Bama alum. But he actually did, I think he did great last year. People do have him on their do draft list. 797 yards last season, missing the first 4 games after that shooting incident. But my problem is their O-line. I think Washington's O-line has lost a step compared to last year, which doesn't bode well when you're supposed to be running behind them. I think right now they're almost last. They're in the bottom half for sure in their offensive line rankings over at PFF. So I'm a little worried about Brian Robinson. Right now he's looking at him in the 6th round. That it's not a bad place for him. If you can get him later, then I think maybe he's a good pickup, but I wouldn't be trying to get him any earlier, really.
Yeah, he had a pretty interesting incident, the shooting incident. What goes into getting back on the field after a non-football injury? Does that play a little more role mentally, or does that, or sports injury going to affect the player a little more? What do you think, Doc?
Ken, I think, again, it gets back to the mental side of the game and helping players through some key life coaching moments, coachable moments that can really help impact a career. And we want this player's career to go absolutely in the right direction. So we want to give that player all the tools necessary to succeed both on and off the field. And there are a ton of resources available in the building where they hang out day in, day out, and they're there many, many hours a day to be able to help them perform at their highest level.
Yeah, I think I might have him on my do draft list. I think a little fire to stay on the team after all the offseason press. And, I guess I'll give a little SEC credit with the Roll Tide, even though I'm a Tiger. So, I might put him on my list this year, guys.
I like it. We'll have to get him on your team, and we'll see how he does.
So speaking of draft strategies, being that we have a little bit of different opinion there, Tyler, which position is more valuable in the PPR and non-PPR league for you? Break down PPR first and then non-PPR.
Well, obviously the PPR, you're looking a little bit more at wide receivers. They're going to be a little bit more important. The big wide receivers, whether you're in a PPR or non-PPR league, the Justin Jeffersons, the Jamar Chases, they're going to give you productivity. You can grab them in the 1st round. They have so many targets that it adds up to so much productivity at the end of the day and so many receiving yards and touchdowns that, it's helpful. But when you're looking at a non-PPR league, then obviously those running backs become so much more important. There's only so many big running backs who produce so much. The Christian McCaffreys, the Saquon Barkleys, Nick Chubb, those kind of guys. When you're getting into your depth two guys and three guys, it can be tough. So, I play a lot more of PPR and half PPR, but I am in a non-PPR league. And I definitely look at running backs a little bit higher in those leagues. But when I'm in my other leagues, I love that 1.02, that second, third round draft pick. Obviously, everyone loves the first round, right? You pick whoever you want. But when you're in that third, or not round, I should say spot, when you're in that third spot, I like it. You don't have to wait as long for your second pick, and you're still getting off the board first. One of the big 3-4 guys, right? You're getting the Christian McCaffreys this year, the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Maybe you throw Cooper Kupp in there, depending on how you feel about his injuries. But I think that's a huge play. So if you can get that second or third spot, then you're in a really good place to draft a good team.
It's interesting, Tyler, when you look at the team composition, how the coaching does it, and how the teams do it. We've seen some great slot receivers, and they're going to get a lot more catches and a lot more short catches for 5, 7, 6, 8, whatever yards. Tight end plays into this as well, and also the backfield. I mean, James White, the Patriots, unbelievable. I had tons of catches from the backfield, but only in certain games. So you might have to, this is someone that might be in and out of the bench based on your league, whether it's PPR or not. And if you got someone coming in the backfield, tight end or a really good slot, they could be very helpful for adding those points up real quickly on receptions.
That's where some of the predictors technology and algorithms comes into play with those bus scores, knowing, which teams have solid offensive lines and healthy lines that can keep the running backs, protected, keep the quarterback protected so that you can rack up those points.
Absolutely.
All right. So guys, after the great draft strategy talk, let's wrap it up today with your NFC East pick. I'm going to go with the Eagles, obviously the clear favorite. Even though there's Alabama quarterback, we'll stick with them again, Tyler. Who you got?
I love it. Well, since you went with the Eagles, I am going to take Dallas this year. I think they have some good receivers on there. CeeDee Lamb, you can't knock him at all. Plus, you have Michael Gallup, you have Brandon Cooks, and then listen, if you have Tony Pollard in the backfield, I know you're a little bit iffy on his ankle and how he's going to do this year, but I like Tony Pollard. I think he's very agile, very quick, and then their defense is strong. I mean, Micah Parsons, that guy's unbelievable. So I'm taking Dallas.
Okay, yeah. Good pick. We'll take that. Okay, Doc, who you got?
Oh, this is so hard. The NFC has provided, he's a Patriots fan, some angst for many years. But this one, I'm going to go Dallas. I want to, I thought it was going to be Eagles, but I'm going to go Dallas. And the reasons are the Eagles are going to have, I think, a hard time keeping their injuries in check. They played a long season. They got a lot of stuff going on, and it's really hard, I think, especially for a team like that. It's a little bit different than Kansas City in terms of repeating at the highest level.
Okay. We got 2 Dallas. Ryan, who are you going to wrap it up with?
I'm going to have to go with the Eagles this year, but I think it's going to be a very, very close division. You have Dallas coming in this year. They have Tony Pollard in the backfield, but they also have a great rookie in Deuce Vaughn out of Kansas State. And they seem like they got some potential to give the Eagles a run for their money. And even the Giants have a little bit of potential. They were carrying some momentum from last season, ride the momentum with Brian Daboll, and you never know. They could be a dark horse favorite for the NFC East, but final pick's going to be the Eagles.
Okay, a little split decision on the staff today. All right, guys. Any last
Wait a
comments?
second. Nobody wants Washington? We sure? I just want to make sure.
They could surprise us. They can make a run at the end. If they stay healthy, they can make a run at the end. I know you got some, line challenges and situations, but any team, they're, 2 injuries away from changing the game.
Yeah, no,
Hey, they broke the Ravens streak. They broke the Ravens preseason streak.
yeah. I like their new owner too, getting involved with the fans, being in the stadium, not in the owner's box, but actually being involved as a fan and wanting the team to do well and perform well.
Yeah, like
No, I 100% agree. I have nothing against Washington. I do think that it's going to take a few years though with the new owners to really build up
Definitely.
and be in that contention. But they took the first steps that they needed to do that.
yeah, it's a competitive league, no question. And so with that, there you have it. Health Matters, where we bring you information to help you win.